Joined now by Vicki McKenna for CultureCast. Vicki, culture, one of those things that we like to preserve, one of those things that we like to think we have, Western culture, right? Freedom, liberty, responsibility, sacrifice, love of country. Do we have a culture anymore? What's going on? What happened to civilization in the West?
That is a good question. Do we even have a culture anymore that we could, a shared culture? And I think we do. It's just not shared by our elites. Our elites seem to think that American culture is, globalism is the idea of rejecting logic and rejecting the lessons of history and Western civilization, rejecting philosophy, rejecting God. That's what our elites think culture is. So they go over to Afghanistan, for instance, and they say, you know how we're going to fix your culture, your country? We're going to force you to adopt the exact opposite views of your entire nation's history going back millennia, because we think you should have women's studies professors, or we think you should have a gender studies program, or we think X, Y, or Z. And they plant the flag and call that America, so that when it collapses, the entire world is supposed to believe that American culture itself has collapsed, has failed. But that's not what Western culture is. That's not what Western civilization is meant to prop up. The decline of logic and, anti-intellectualism. That's not what this is about. The problem is the people who still believe in logic and freedom and individual responsibility and choice and deriving our rights from God don't have a voice. And the ones who are supposed to speak for us are either feckless idiots or they're on the take. And that's what's so frustrating about seeing what's happening right now. We are all complicit in the disaster that is going on in Afghanistan right now, with 10,000 American citizens stranded, unable to get to an airport, and even if they could, unlikely to be extracted from that country. We're all complicit in it because we all, none of us stood up and put our foot down in any significant number and said, no, don't do this. Defend American culture, Western culture, before you decide to try to figure out ways, to collapse somebody else's using the exact opposite of the things that give this nation strength.
Yeah, no one in the world is coming here as a refugee seeking out more women's studies courses. No one comes to this country seeking out transgender surgeries for free. No one's coming to this country because they want more onerous government. They don't want that. What they want is what we used to be American civilization: liberty, freedom, the opportunity, the ability to choose your own destiny. That's what America represented. And I really do believe this. I think when you look at a postmodern nation state like the United States with all of its wealth and power, and you look at a third world religious cult, ultimately over time, the cult's going to win out. Because they believe in things that are immutable and eternal. However messed up Islam is worldwide, no matter how incredibly corrupt it is in places like Afghanistan, how twisted it is, nevertheless, there is a deep commitment to family, to children, to the culture. We have nothing like that in America. Everything here is one great, remember back a couple years ago when it was talk to the hand? One great whatever, say the American elites, about our culture. They have no interest in preserving it.
No, and I mean, you began with a question: what is it? Could you get 90 out of 100 Americans to say the exact same thing about American culture? I don't know. But think about the experiment of training the Afghan military to stand up against the Taliban. Training the Afghan military. So we're going to go in there, we're going to teach them to shoot guns. We're going to teach them to use higher tech weapons. We're going to pay them money. And then we're going to tell them to fight the people who are fighting on, under some banner of God, however they conceive of God. You've got people with, what amounts to pitchforks and shovels up against folks with high-tech weaponry. But one group is only doing it for money and the other group is doing it for God. God is going to win every single time, even if you've got a warped idea of what God is. That is why this was never going to happen, and it's why it collapsed so quickly. How did the Afghan military, with $1 trillion in U.S. investment and all of the training that our best and our most talented tactical people gave them, how did they fold like a cheap suit in under 2 days? And it's because they weren't fighting for anything except a paycheck. And when God came around the corner, they thought, I think I'm going to sign up with that guy right there.
After the break, I want to talk about this with relation to the American military, because that right now is one of the grossest examples we have of a country that doesn't even really want to defend itself. We'll talk about this around the corner. Okay, back now with Vicki McKenna for CultureCast. Vicki, we were saying before the break, is there an organization in this outside of the public schools and the universities? Is there an organization in this culture that has decided that Americans were the enemy, not the enemy is the enemy? Is there a more important organization than the United States military, whose job should be to defend to the last man, defend to the last trans soldier, right, the freedoms and the liberties of this country and its history and its heritage and its constitution, with the oath they take when they become soldiers? Is there an organization that is more corrupt now in not only betraying the American people, not protecting them, but participating in the unmaking of American civilization?
And I want to be abundantly clear and very, very specific here. When I'm talking about the military, I'm talking about military leadership. I am talking about people who are calling the shots on policy. I'm talking about people who are forcing these idiotic, progressive political ideological structures and lenses over everything our military does. And it is very, very dangerous. And we've talked about this before. If you took a look just a few months ago at the release of the Russian recruitment ad for the Russian military, it was all about readiness. It was about pride in nation. It was about toughness. It was about masculinity.
Celebrating testosterone.
Exactly. You could feel the sweat from the commercial. Everybody should look that up. And here we are, and we've got little cartoons about about 5'2", 109-pound women who just want a new adventure so that they can come home and tell their two moms, the neat things they got to do while also getting a free college education out of the whole deal. So yeah, that's a good question. When the military leadership, which by the way created the disaster in Afghanistan, the same clowns who are telling us that the military's number one objective now is to clear the nation of domestic extremists who didn't accept that the election was on the up and up in 2020. We're supposed to trust that these clowns are going to be able to figure out something as complicated as Afghanistan. They're the idiots who got us there in the first place. They're the morons who said what we should do in Afghanistan is try to seat women studies professors and create master's degrees in Marxism in a backward 6th century third world country. These are the exact same people who are saying, what the real goal of the United States military ought to be? It ought to be to get those domestic extremists, those Trump voters out of the military, even though they're the ones who sign up in the first place, and use the military to police the nation of dissent from the elite left-wing orthodoxy. Because if we can do that, if we can be that force that can shut down dissent, then maybe the clown show, the elitist globalist clown show that is running this country into the dirt will be able to do it without feeling as if anybody's criticizing them. And it scares the crap out of me because the same people running this military might very well use it against the American people. And when I say use it, I mean besides just looking at our Facebook pages.
Yeah, and just yesterday in the news, there was a leaked course that was being taught at the cadets after some of the higher up said that we're not teaching Marxism. Sure enough, it was released yesterday that certain classes that our young recruits were learning were actually advocating for Marxist ideology. These are kids signed up to fight for the Constitution and American liberty, now being drilled, tested, and forced to see the world through the lens of the communist Chinese, for God's sake.
Look at the world through the lens of our enemies. That they are trying to make the United States military fight on the same side as China.
That's right.
That is insane. And that nobody seems that upset about it. I don't understand it. You've got your grandsons, nephews, and sons in the military, and you should be terrified of this. Look what they were willing to do to young men in Afghanistan, let them get their legs blown off, or in Iraq. And I mean that they're willing to put your boys on top of bombs to be blown up and destroyed in order to promote China's worldview? Are you flipping kidding me? Everybody should be offended. Every veteran should be offended. Every injured war veteran should be outraged. Every parent, every American should be looking at this and saying, this has got to stop. And I'll tell you the word that everybody needs to start talking about, and I know it's a naughty word, and I know it's a really, really scary word, but that word is impeachment. Let's start talking about it.